Hey guys, welcome to part 5. Let's get stuck in. So looking back at the previous image that we had, I noticed that there was a lot of blue light in here that I really liked and wanted to bring back into the image. So the first thing I did was color correction, and I added some blue and some little purples here and there to kind of bring it back to that without killing the warmth from the sun too much. And another thing I did was bump up the glass in the background using some adjustment layers and just to make it sort of stick out from the background. The next part is really the meat and potatoes of the image, and it's the majority of the work really. So it was a lot of work in this particular layer folder before I did any specific painting. So the first thing I like to do is start with the background of an image, and this is something I typically do these days more and more. And there are a few reasons behind that. First, it's personal preference. Secondly, I prefer to work from the background to the foreground because there's less detail in the background, and it also has a lot of lighting information that could potentially inform what I'm doing with the rest of my layers. So the first thing I did was, boom, drop a background in there and make sure that it's fitting exactly that area by using my selection masks. And you can see it's really low detail. It's just some mountains and some maybe futuristic city back there, and very, very low detail. At that distance, you wouldn't see anything. So then I decided, okay, let's bump up the heat on this foreground and make this figure over here a bit more of a statement, a bit more of our image focus. Then I had a look at the floor texture and I added some sci-fi elements, some sci-fi lines. Then I added some texture to the carpets, which of course in our original image were just too flat. And so I made the conscious decision to add some velvet into this area and create some subtle shadows to those carpeted areas. Then I had a look at the walls in the back, which I ended up actually painting over later with another texture pass. Um, then I had a look at some of these terminal bits, and I just wanted to make the shapes a bit more interesting, adding some extra elements on there, maybe some plates. Then I had a look at the this beautiful turning symbol here. It's more of an effect. I should have really put it in the effects folder, but I stole this straight out of an airport photo, and it had some other language for what the airlines were called, and I just went in there and painted out the names, the acronyms, and I just added my own so that it's got like a GAV and an ONI, and it's sort of you have no idea where they're going, but it's sci-fi, right? It's all good. Then I had a look at creating this area over here to be closer to the reference I had. So I really just went in there and bumped up the counter in terms of glows and the bottom part, make that read a bit stronger and create some space for a person to put some documents or a device or anything. The next part was to control the light of the pillars above. And I felt like the render was fine, but it was a bit too extreme and it didn't quite have the same look as the photo reference that I had. And that's another great reason to have good photo reference, is that it will inform you exactly how light is supposed to fall on an object and at what distance and to what intensity. And so I just went in there and I made sure that that was corrected. And typically what I do for that, if you guys are curious, is I just select a little portion of this, and because the reflection is more or less the same, I will copy this section up, and then I will use a mask to basically erase parts that I don't need with a soft brush, and that sort of gives you the pulled back effect that I have here. So moving forward, we have adjusted the bounce light over here, made it a little bit more intense, because sometimes your render doesn't give you what you want, and you really do have to use your artistic interpretation and push it a little bit stronger. This part over here, I decided to focus on this window area where it's a bit darker and really bump that up with some light and make it read a bit more soft and beautiful. So the next pass is something somewhat of a big effort on my part of painting out these sofas, which I wasn't really happy with, and I felt like they could be redesigned. It was something I wanted to do earlier on, but I didn't really know where to go for that. So I found some good photo reference of a nice futuristic looking chair, and I just grabbed parts of it and started manipulating them into place and painting it out and stretching bits until I got a pretty cool result. So here are the new sofas that I put into place. I put them into perspective, and I hope that you can see that if I create a new layer over this, The understanding of good perspective knows that when something moves away from you, it also, let me just, there we go. When something moves away from you into perspective, oh, look at this arrow, it's so perfect. It also pinches, right? Because this is a 2-point perspective. We've got one going down that way, and we've got one going down this way. Actually, I should mention that I have a perspective layer. I recommend everybody make this. If you've got 2-point perspective, you can just drop some over there, drop another one over there, and I just hide this when I'm not using it. But I use it, trust me. It's very, very useful, and I would recommend everybody use it. So when lining up this, I had to realize that, okay, I've got this sofa was the first thing I painted, and I was like, okay, I have that, but I want to replace all of them. So I started copying it over, but you realize when perspective is moving down in depth, it pinches, right? Because this part of the sofa over here will move this way, and this part of the sofa will move this way because it's being pinched like this, right? In perspective. And so you kind of have to know perspective pretty well and instinctively to know that that's what happens when things move away from you. And so over here I did the same thing, and this side was way more difficult because I didn't have reference for this kind of thing. So I just went by eye and kind of painted it down. And I was pretty happy with the results. I think in the end you hardly look there because of the lighting adjustments I do later on. I actually forgot to put the one in the corner here, and I actually put it in later. So the next thing I did was have a look at this top area and realized that, oh man, the one thing that this image didn't have, well, it kind of has it over here, is some kind of terminal pass up there. So I just manipulated a terminal in there, and I painted out all the stupid text stuff, and I moved it into perfect perspective using my perspective grid over here. And yeah, then I had a look at this little side table over here in the corner, and I decided to change this design because I felt like it was a bit too boring and a bit too flat. And so I had to look around for some photo reference of like what really kick-ass designs people are doing out there. And I'm sure some Scandinavian decided this was a cool idea and put this out there. So I changed this, but I realized, okay, then I'm gonna have to put it in perspective over here, 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 here. So that's a lot of work. So I was like, okay, I'll paint that in later. So you'll see later, I do actually paint that back in. Um, so then I just bumped up the lighting in the background because I felt like it was a bit too dark and a bit too contrasty. It was kind of taking away a bit. Then I had a look at the foreground character, who I wanted to be the focus of my image. So typically this is how I start laying in textures for my character. I match the perspective of the 3D model that I put there, and I start bringing in photo elements of people in that same pose that I find, you know, just lying around the internet. And I just kind of grab those photos and I manipulate them into place. And when you first start, your character might look a bit crappy and a bit crazy, like a dull or cutout collage. But later on, you sort of work in the rest of the textures and you start to build this character up piece by piece using different elements from different photos. And pretty soon, you start having a really believable character, right? I mean, look at this, just coming together with design. Oh man, this crown really excites me. It was actually a necklace jewelry piece that I was trying to get her to wear around her neck, and it wasn't working, so I couldn't figure out what to do. And then I was just moving it around, and I was like, hey, what if it's a hairpin? And it actually worked out. So it does pay to experiment a little bit. Here I am just building up the clothes on this character. We can't necessarily have her naked. So then I just put in some more shoes, some more perspective on the feet, and I started to lay in this guy in the background here, and I realized pretty like later that I really hated this, and I got rid of it, and you'll see that coming up. So after this point, I started looking at the image, and I was like, okay, I really want to bring in some of the photo reference ideas for putting stuff on the glass and making it look a bit more sci-fi. So I thought, okay, let me just drop this really cool texture over here behind this character, and then I'll be creating a lot of conflict in this area of just like lots of whites, lots of blacks, and lots of lights again. So your eye is just like, bam, I want to look over here, right? Boom. So after that, I had a look at the walls up here, and I added a little bit of textures, a little bit of a sort of Mass Effect-y look, and I was like, okay, that's pretty cool for now. I'll come back in later and paint that out and make it look good. So then I had to address flatter areas of my render that I hadn't yet, and I was like, okay, boom, I need to put texture in here. Bam, drop that in. Um, I just created like a basic line art, and then I tiled it, and then I just placed it in that area. So over here you can see I completely replaced that background wall element, and I dropped in this fat sort of plasticky looking design that I feel is a little bit more terminally, not as in you have cancer, sir, but more as in, this is just something more believable in this area. Then I had a look at the character in the background, which I really hated, and I got rid of him. I was like, see ya, buddy. Bam, painted him out. And that's the cool thing. So, oh, here are the characters. All right. I put in all the mid-ground characters, including the two women here helping this guy. And I put in this buddy over here, even though you can still see the legs over here of the previous character that I had laid in. And then I put in this guy over here, believe it or not, reading a book in the future, right? So later on, I addressed that issue by just making it a glowing book. But it was really a perfect pose, and I was like, "Ah, man, I'm using this. This is a great character." So there you can see I paint out this area here with this character. Just paint him out. Bam. Very quick. Very easy. Then I gave this guy some cool glasses, and I laid in the background character over here. Just a simple character, not doing much, just walking by. And then, what is this final pass? Not too sure what this one is. Oh yes, it's just painting out some details in the corner here. Okay, that's fine. So that's the major texture pass. So let's have a look at the first painting pass that I do. It's generally fixing errors, which is exactly what this is. It's very, you can hardly notice it. Like a few things change, like over here, and changing over here, just a few little errors that weren't reading well, so I just painted them out. Then I start putting in some more detail. In this pass I did quite a lot actually. I focused on this area above to make it darker, and I added some plants, which I felt was sorely lacking in the previous image, and except for outside. But I really just wanted some more green in here to bring some more life and some more harmony and some more tranquility to this feeling and this mood. And so I dropped some pot plants in here, and I found some good plants and a good pot that looked quite sci-fi, and I just duplicated it. I made sure the lighting changed, I made sure the detail changed, controlled the contrast so it was dark to light for the most part. And of course I masked them out using the surface, so it looks like it's got some overlapping forms. You really feel, you're really just, accentuating that perspective in the image, which is good. What else did I do in this pass? I gave this guy a really cool, like almost Blade Runner type coat. He looks almost like that new actor who's playing, what's it, Ryan Gosling? Looks a bit like him actually. Then I painted in some lights fixes for shadows, like here by her foot. I fixed that area. Also gave the sofa some lighting from outside, and I adjusted the lighting on the tops of these sofas to be more correct, and adjust some light passing through the leaves here. Just general little things that sort of just, that last 20%, as they say. Okay, so after this pass, if I zoom out, what you can see, hopefully not too small on your screen, is an image that has a lot of, let's call it weight, in different areas. And the whole image seems to have one type of weight. And so when I'm typically done with the texturing and the painting phase of a painting, oh, by the way, I forgot to mention I dropped in all these fixes on these little side tables here. Um, and when you do that, by the way, you do have to fix the lighting because the lighting has to pour through, right? Let me see if I can isolate that so you can see it. Yeah, there you can. You can see it go through there, and you can see the lighting has to change, right? That's important. Um, so that's what this next pass does. If I zoom out, you can see if I click it on, it creates much more warmth and interest and bloom around this area of focus than the rest of the image. In fact, it darkens the rest of the image slightly, just slightly. And if I flick on a black and white pass, you can really just see that jumping from like the whole image has some weight, and then boom, the weight sinks to the bottom left to where I want you to look, right? And that's really important for an image, is to just say, hey, let's make the viewer look here. It's important. So the last phase, and I think the most exciting phase of any science fiction piece, is adding all the special effects and making this image come to life a little bit. So I really wanted to address this area over here, and I wanted to make it look like this clearance area that I had in the previous image with the various effects. but I wanted to bump it up in terms of like how do I make that look like it's actually scanning someone or being a part of some kind of passport control or something. And then I wanted to bring this pink screen back in, which I thought was the sort of focus of this main image. And now that we have more control, it should be the focus of this main image. So, without further ado, let me just flick it on. Bam, there we go. Now we've got a science fiction artwork, right? I've added really cool details back here, like a map of the world and some DNA strand and some stuff you should not take on board a flight. This woman is just technologically savvy, and we've got a guy over here who's being a badass, just coding in his spare time, at the airport or wherever. And this guy's got a little glowing book, so he's pretty happy about being in the future, even though he likes to keep it old school. So when I finish a painting like this, I typically like to copy the entire piece across to uh, a flat new canvas, and then from there I start to make layer adjustments and final tweaks and things like sharpening the image, checking the contrast, pushing the light glows, pushing the colors, the vibrancy, and getting an image to read like a final export. And so that's what this next layer is. Bam. So I really did push some of the colors and some of the brightness on this, and I pushed some of the glow from the screen to be a bit more pink on her skin in various areas before the light from the sun actually influenced them. Overall, I also brought the image over to a more mid-tone centric level scale in terms of values. And a part of that reasoning was that I didn't want the image to read as dark and gloomy. I wanted it to have a higher key light than this image originally, which was quite black and dark and sort of depressing when really the mood I was going for is relaxing, right? And sort of pleasant. So that's what the last pass kind of helps me achieve. I also made some small tweaks to the lighting and some of the design and painting out some of this texture errors that I had before. So, your final phase can offer quite a lot to the depth of your image, and that's what I did here. Did a bit of value depth separation as well on the surface. So that is the final image, guys, and I really hope that you like this process. I really hope that moving forward, some of you are brave enough to, some years down the line, pick up an old piece of yours and, see what you're made out of, man. Just jump in there and see what you're capable of, what you can improve on from your original image to the kind of things you've learned over the years. And trust me, guys, art, it does come. You just have to stick to it and put in the work. And the more work you do, the better your work becomes. So if you like this tutorial series and you like the format, and if you don't like the format, let me know. Do leave me a like or two or subscribe to my channel. If you guys like this stuff, please let me know because I'd like to produce some more of it from you. There's so many ideas I have that I feel would be great as a video series, stuff that I don't particularly see on YouTube, and I'm always watching stuff. And I feel like I want to address some of the stuff that hasn't been seen before, a bit like, redoing an old piece, or how do you copy someone else's style, or like how do you interpret things, how do you look at briefs, a bit more of the sort of technical side of concept art. And if you guys think that that's a good idea and you like this stuff, please, like I said, stick around, let me know. And thanks for watching, guys. I really appreciate it, and I hope you have an awesome day. Later.